name is Tom Goldfried, and today my lecture is going to be on psychedelic colonization and the decolonization of the psychedelic renaissance. So a little bit of background just before, I'm just finishing up my master's in the PPI program here, and I work for a psilocybin research company and ketamine clinic. So this is something that I consider on a daily basis when it comes to our psilocybin research. So, first want to go over our learning objectives. So today, you should be able to come up with your own definition of psychedelic colonization. There's not kind of one definition. It's lots of facets, so I'd like to see kind of what people think and be able to explain significance. We need to be able to compare and contrast Western and indigenous psychedelic use. We want to be able to give examples of colonization of psychedelics. And we want to consider ways that we can incorporate indigenous values and knowledge into the psychedelic renaissance. Perfect. So, a big part of this class has taught us, how culture can drastically change perspectives. And today we want to look how this kind of relates to psychedelics. So currently, right now, if nobody knows, we're going through a psychedelic revolution, a psychedelic renaissance, whatever you want to call it. So, this really consists of the increase of research, and this is due to medicalization efforts, decriminalization efforts, legalization, and research has just exploded around it. And we're seeing places like Australia approving MDMA for use in certain instances. We're seeing the FDA being very close to approving MDMA as well. We're seeing ketamine used as a psychoactive drug to treat mental health. Seeing tons of it. So, this kind of brings two problems when we're looking at it from a colonization standpoint, especially because lots of these psychedelics originate from indigenous communities. So, we've got the Western lens of psychedelics and the Western lens of research and the Western lens of medicine. And then we've got the idea that psychedelics are from, indigenous cultures and how do we reconcile that. So first, we want to look at the kind of Western versus indigenous lens. So, the Western lens of medicine is, how we get, medicine nowadays, and it's how we're going through the medicalization process of psychedelics. So, we have, and I'm talking here generally in terms of mental health for Western. So, we have our diagnosis. When you have something that feels wrong, you go to the doctor, they do a test, give you a diagnosis. Based on the diagnosis, you get a treatment. You get the treatment, you either take it forever or you take it for a little bit, and you're good after, no problems, is kind of the idea of it. Indigenous medicine does not follow the same kind of tenets. The diagnostic criteria is not the same. The diagnoses are not the same. Causes of illness are not the same. There's lots of spiritual kind of influence, lots of outside factors. It's not the cell-based kind of theory that Western medicine is built on. And this follows the way that their medicine and psychedelics are used in these cultures. So they're often not just used as medicine. So, for example, from our class, the Wixara people, peyote is used to, connect with ancestors, has a very spiritual aspect as well. And then when we look at Western research, it's notoriously cemented on our Western views and our Western views of medicine. How can we, optimize this drug? How can we purify it? How can we then, market it and sell it to, whoever we want? And it's cemented on the fact that most of the research is happening on white, straight, cisgender participants, and particularly looking at psychedelic studies, over 80% of the participants are white, which is just, pretty unacceptable, because it means that it privileges our white Western voices over the, indigenous practitioners who have been using ancestral knowledge, tech, that roots back to their origins. As mentioned, the indigenous use of psychedelics isn't the same as Western medical use, or even the same as Western recreational use, which I'll mention a little bit of indigenous, somewhat recreational use later. So the indigenous medical use, differs culture to culture, and also these compounds have a large ritual and spiritualistic component. Again, noting the Wixara's people, where it teaches them how to hunt the peyote, and it also teaches them about the history of your people, and allows them to understand the legends of where they come from, and it's the history of the culture. So, going now, this kind of bridges us into the idea that psychedelics are not, that they're from indigenous cultures a lot of the time. This is not everyone, but For example, LSD, is completely synthesized. Interesting right now is, 5-MeO-DMT, from the bufo toad. There's some speak that there is indigenous use of it, and there's lots of frog motifs, but we don't really have any hard evidence that it was ever used by indigenous cultures, so that's kind of an interesting one. But, we look at stuff like ayahuasca, so including DMT, cannabis, we have psilocybin, iboga, lots and lots of options are used traditionally in indigenous cultures. And, how do we, bioprospect this? How do we, how have we been bioprospecting this? How have we been biopirating this? Is a really, really hot topic right now, given the amount of patent issues going on in the psychedelic space. Because in the Western lens, we want to research, we want to refine, we want to patent, we want to market, we want to sell these compounds. And they have big cultural importance to these people and places that we've taken them from. That's gone on for millennia. Today I want to look at ayahuasca, so a little bit about it. So it's used by indigenous people from the Amazonian basin, often a combination of 2 or more plants, so one of them containing DMT, often from Psychotria viridis or chacroon, and the other is a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, which allows the DMT to be absorbed through the stomach. And this is often from Banisteriopsis caapi, aka yagai, or the soul vine. So you can even see in the cultural folk taxonomy of the names that it has a spiritual element with the soul vine. And these indigenous cultures have found the specific information, the specific combination of plants. It's an invention by these Amazonian communities, yet we're trying to patent it here in Western communities for our research, for our selling purposes. So the brew often contains additional ingredients, and it's used in ceremonies and rituals led by a shaman. Now, let's even break down shaman itself to Western language colonization. It doesn't mean one thing. It can include a ton of different traditional specialists, curanderos, which are traditional, indigenous healers, to ayahuasqueros, who are the people who are experts in brewing the ayahuasca and, choosing the specific ingredients, how to combine it together and how to prepare for consumption, how to administer it. They're not necessarily healers, though. And you even have the more specific vegetalista, which is, a type of Peruvian Amazonian shaman that is, providing healing and gaining their knowledge and healing power through the regional plants. So, there's a big regional connection to the plants that grows around them for their idea of healthcare. And the idea that, it's a singular type of ritual, so this ayahuasca is one type of ritual led by a shaman, is an inherently colonist thought process. So, Peruvian archaeologist and curandero, so an expert in, administering ayahuasca, Ruben Orellana, has found that many ayahuasca traditions were developed for the people within the certain cultural background. So it was made for the people, by the people using it, and not necessarily built with the wide stream appeal. So as such, going there with a Western lens, trying to use these rituals for Western people, means that the benefits aren't going to be the same. They're coming at it from a completely different viewpoint. So, and then when we look at the, breaking the side note, the different ingredients in ayahuasca and brewing techniques, this makes the effects of it highly variable. So, each village has their own, and each community might have their own way of brewing it together, whether they brew it hot, whether they brew it cold for a long time, short time, what ingredients they add. Sometimes extra hallucinogenic plants are added. Sometimes stuff to help with other symptoms of ayahuasca trip is added. It's very, very, variable. The concentration of ayahuasca, how much that you take, and the biggest difference is how you take the ayahuasca and why and when you take the ayahuasca differs between communities and cultures. So in 1968, two research went along to a bunch of different indigenous communities in the Amazon using ayahuasca. And so they found in these Pano-speaking indigenous communities, the healer actually takes the ayahuasca, not the patient who has the issue. They're the experts in decoding the wisdom from the ayahuasca, discovering the metaphysical, the spiritual reasons behind the patient's problems and illness, and then are able to communicate with them and then use other, kind of traditional medicine around them to cure or help, the issue. which is completely different kind of how we take medicine in the Western front. You don't go to the doctor and the doctor takes the medication for you and you feel better. But you have to break that cultural kind of thought process. So some communities, regular people will consume the brew in a more casual setting, using it as somewhat at a recreational point, helping to further their bond, between friends and family over their shared spiritual experience. Some healers and average men and women will use it to kind of learn about the spiritual world around them, to tap into the spiritual connections or religious connections, or even to physically visit loved ones when they're separated by distance. It's always noted that ayahuasca use changes and evolves with the community's needs. It's thought that some indigenous tribes have even given up ayahuasca use and then later readopted the practice in following centuries when it became more appropriate for their culture again. So even in the 20th century, it's been observed by anthropologists that 2 indigenous tribes have developed their own ayahuasca tradition. Situational change in rituals is a foundation of traditional Amazonian culture. And, it sheds a light onto the rigidity of Western culture, Western medicine, and Western research, where change like that takes so long. Whereas here we're seeing, generational change in the way that, ayahuasca has been adopted, introduced, and used by certain indigenous cultures. And so, in our Western lens, what we think of, an ayahuasca tradition is based on the traditions of specific indigenous communities around Iquitos, Peru, because it was highly written about in Western journals and sources in the 60s and 70s. All of this demonstrates the overall impact one's culture has on the use of medicine, especially one that's so powerful. The idea of set and setting itself is Western and has colonial undertones, especially if we give it a baseline advice for all psychedelic users. Given that that's the main advice now, if you ask kind of the average person, oh, how do I have the best time with psychedelics? Oh, manage your set and setting. Great if you come from a Western lens, but this advice may mean absolutely nothing to an indigenous person using psychedelics, the same way cultural advice based on indigenous culture use of psychedelics might not apply to a Westerner. And it's studied from a long time ago, 1958, that showed that culture plays a huge role in the psychedelic experience. So peyote was administered to indigenous groups coming from cultures where psychedelics were used, and there's been a framework. And in these instances, it was exceptionally well tolerated by almost all the people. Almost all of them had positive and what they call spiritual experiences. Now, when we use the same methods on a Western population, and peyote is administered to them, a majority found the experience to be uncomfortable and distressing. This just further kind of shows that, culture has such a huge impact on the experiences of these drugs, and we're not kind of fully understanding it. This author in 1958 suggested that we need cultural controls in drug trials. Isn't that, groundbreaking and something that we still haven't had yet? This demonstrates the power culture has over people's experience of drugs. So drugs in general, because, again, look back at research, mostly on white people, males and 20 to 30 years old. How can we extrapolate that evidence? And we're seeing right here, indigenous people who have this experience culturally with psychedelics fare better when they take it. And it's not being addressed in current psychedelic research is the big thing. So I guess the big question, how do we decolonize psychedelics? So, it's with all these concepts from the course. It's multifactorial. We need to examine research methods. We need to examine research ethics. We need to, look into the research ethics in terms of specifically interacting with indigenous communities. And, we need to solidify biopiracy, bioprospecting rules. The UN CBD needs to be reevaluated and needs to include more opinion from the indigenous communities who are really at the, receiving end of it. The final example that I want to use, and kind of the biggest point of everything, is that we need to keep an open mind when it comes to indigenous knowledge and its use around psychedelics. So, when I watched the Wixiara video, the children using peyote, to me, seemed absolutely unreasonable. It seemed to go against every kind of thing that seems, that I agree with when it comes to researching psychedelics. But, that's entirely from my Western point of view. It's considered wrong in Western culture, the same way certain drugs are considered bad or hard in Western culture. But really, it's the attitude, the reasons for use, and the history that makes it fundamental for the Wixárika people to use it, especially for their children when it comes to understanding their culture. So I want to leave kind of with the end of the day that, it's the education that empowers us all, and it's the education empowers us all to decolonize ourselves and to decolonize psychedelics as well. Thank you so much.